What happens when Hollywood's sharpest wit walks into a room built for comfort, and a question meant to tease turns into a spark that lights the entire table on fire? What happens when Robert Downey Jr., a man whose life has already survived collapse, comeback, and canonization, sits across from Joy Behar on The View and decides he's done deflecting with charm? Before we go any further, subscribe to the Narration Show, hit like, and drop a comment right now, because moments like this aren't just interviews, they're collisions you feel in your chest. The applause came fast and loud as Robert Downey Jr. stepped onto the stage, the kind of applause reserved for someone the audience felt they already knew. He smiled easily, waving, soaking it in, but there was something measured in the way he moved, as if he were already calculating angles, already listening for the turn. He took his seat, adjusted his jacket, crossed one ankle over the other, relaxed but alert. Joy Behar sat a few chairs down, papers in hand, glasses perched low, watching him with the familiar mix of amusement and skepticism she reserved for guests who came armed with confidence. The opening minutes felt light, almost playful. They talked about his film, about legacy, about how surreal it felt to be considered an icon. Robert leaned into humor, self-deprecation sliding effortlessly into sincerity. The audience laughed, clapped, leaned forward. This was the Downey they loved, quick, reflective, seemingly untouchable. Joy smiled, nodding along, tossing in jokes that landed softly. For a moment, it felt like the kind of segment that would drift by and be forgotten by lunchtime. But tension rarely announces itself. Sometimes it slips in through tone. Joy shifted, tapping her notes lightly. "You've had quite the redemption story," she said, her voice casual but pointed. "Some people don't get second chances like that." The audience quieted just a little. Robert's smile didn't disappear, but it tightened, subtle as a shadow crossing glass. He nodded once. "That's true," he replied. "I've been very fortunate." His tone was respectful, calm, practiced. Joy didn't stop there. "Do you ever think Hollywood is a little too forgiving when it likes you?" she asked, eyebrows lifting. A ripple moved through the audience. Robert inhaled slowly, the kind of breath you take when you recognize a familiar road turning steeper. "I think Hollywood responds to accountability," he said carefully, "and consistency." A few claps followed, hesitant. Joy leaned back, unconvinced. "Or box office," she said, half smiling. The laugh that followed was scattered. Robert's eyes flicked to the audience, then back to Joy. Something shifted in his posture. He leaned forward slightly, elbows nearing his knees, humor giving way to focus. "I don't disagree," he said. "But success doesn't erase consequences." His voice was steady, but there was weight in it now. Joy tilted her head. "But consequences that still end with applause?" she asked. The room tightened. Robert paused. A real pause. Long enough for the audience to sense it. He studied her for a beat, not defensive, not angry, but deciding. When he spoke again, his voice was softer but sharper. "Applause isn't forgiveness," he said. "It's acknowledgement that someone didn't quit." The audience reacted immediately, applause swelling, louder this time. Joy raised her hand slightly, signaling she wasn't done. "But quitting wasn't an option for you," she said. "You had support, resources, people willing to wait." Robert nodded, acknowledging the truth. "Yes," he said, "and I'm grateful for that every day." His eyes stayed locked on hers. "But support doesn't do the work for you." Joy's smile thinned. "Some would argue it makes the work easier." A murmur followed. Robert straightened now, shoulders squared. "It makes survival possible," he replied. "Not growth." The line landed harder than expected. The audience clapped, some louder than others, the divide beginning to show. Joy leaned forward, sensing momentum. "So you're saying anyone could do what you did, given the chance?" she pressed. Robert shook his head. "No," he said. "I'm saying anyone can change if they choose to." His voice rose just slightly, not confrontational but firm. "The chance doesn't matter if the choice never happens." Joy tapped her pen again. "But not everyone gets endless chances," she said. "And watching certain people be celebrated after failure can feel insulting." The studio grew quiet. Robert exhaled through his nose, nodding slowly. "I agree," he said. "It can." He paused, then added, "But punishing change doesn't heal that insult." That was the moment the air changed. Joy's eyebrows lifted. "Punishing," she echoed. "Or holding accountable?" The audience leaned in collectively. Robert leaned back, then forward again, eyes bright now, words precise. "Accountability asks for responsibility," he said. "Punishment demands permanence." His tone sharpened. "They're not the same thing." The audience erupted, applause crashing across the room. Joy waited for it to settle, then responded calmly. "Tell that to people who don't get to rewrite their narratives," she said. Robert met her gaze. "I'm not rewriting mine," he replied. "I'm living with it." His voice dropped lower. "Every day." A hush followed, thick and heavy. Joy studied him, her expression shifting, less playful now. "So you think criticism of your success is unfair?" she asked. Robert shook his head immediately. "No," he said. "I think it's necessary." He paused, then added, "I just don't think it should erase the work someone's done to become better." Joy leaned back, folding her arms. "That sounds very convenient," she said. The audience reacted audibly, a mix of gasps and applause. Robert smiled then, but it wasn't charming. It was tight knowing. "It would be," he said, "if I hadn't nearly destroyed myself earning that perspective." The room froze. Joy's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's dramatic," she said. Robert didn't flinch. "So was my life," he replied. The comeback hit like a dropped glass. The audience exploded, applause loud and sustained, some people standing, others stunned. Joy blinked, momentarily caught off guard. For the first time, Robert leaned fully into the table, voice calm but unwavering. "I'm not asking to be admired," he said. "I'm asking not to be reduced." His words hung in the air, heavy, deliberate. Joy opened her mouth to respond, then paused, recalibrating. The hosts shifted in their seats. Whoopi glanced between them, sensing the escalation. The audience buzzed, whispers overlapping. Robert sat back slowly, the edge still there, eyes steady. Joy adjusted her glasses, her tone sharpening. "Reduction happens when public figures forget the public," she said. Robert nodded once. "And humanity disappears when we forget people," he replied. The tension didn't break. It crystallized. The playful interview was gone, replaced by something raw and unresolved. As the cameras pushed closer, catching every micro-expression, everyone in the room knew this wasn't just banter anymore. It was a reckoning beginning to form, sharp and unpredictable. And whatever was coming next would leave a mark neither of them could smooth over with a joke. The applause that followed his last line didn't feel celebratory. It felt nervous, like the room itself wasn't sure whether it was clapping for honesty or bracing for impact. Robert Downey Jr. sat back in his chair, jaw set, eyes steady, the echo of his words still hanging between him and Joy Behar. Joy adjusted her glasses slowly, buying herself a moment, the kind of pause that only made the tension louder. Around them, the audience shifted, some nodding, some whispering, all aware they were watching something that had slipped past polite television and into dangerous honesty. Joy broke the silence first. "No one is reducing you to nothing," she said, her tone controlled but sharper now. "But public figures don't get to decide how the public processes their past." The sentence landed cleanly, with intent. Robert leaned forward slightly, elbows near his knees again, the posture of someone fully engaged, no longer performing. "I agree," he replied. "But the public doesn't live with the consequences the way the person does." His voice was calm, but the words carried weight. They observe. They comment. Then they move on. A murmur rippled through the audience, divided but attentive. Joy tilted her head, studying him. "You think we move on too easily?" she asked. Robert smiled faintly, not amused. "I think we move on selectively," he said. "We remember the mistakes we want to remember." The audience reacted audibly, a mix of applause and uneasy laughter. Joy leaned back, folding her arms loosely, not defensive but braced. "So what do you want?" she asked. "Sympathy." The word was sharp. Robert shook his head immediately. "No," he said. "Context." His voice firmed. "And consistency." Joy raised an eyebrow. "Consistency from who?" she pressed. "The industry? The audience? The people who don't get a comeback tour?" The room felt smaller now, as if the walls had edged closer. Robert exhaled slowly. "From ourselves," he replied. "From how we talk about failure." He gestured lightly with one hand. "Because if change is never enough, then why would anyone try?" The audience clapped, louder now, some rising slightly from their seats before settling back down. Joy waited, letting the reaction pass, her expression unreadable. "You're assuming everyone gets the chance to try," she said. "Some people make one mistake and disappear." The words carried frustration, not accusation. Robert nodded. "That's true," he said. "And that's a problem." His voice softened just a fraction. "But the answer can't be dragging everyone else down to permanent erasure." That line sparked an immediate reaction. Applause burst out, scattered but intense. A few gasps followed. Joy leaned forward again, sensing the shift. Permanent erasure sounds dramatic, she said. Most people aren't asking you to vanish. They're asking you not to be glorified. Robert met her gaze. There's a difference between glorification and acknowledgement, he replied. And sometimes people confuse the two. The audience hummed, uncertain but engaged. Joy tapped her notes again, then looked up sharply. You're still benefiting from the system, she said. Awards. Roles. Influence. Robert didn't deny it. He nodded once. Yes, he said. And I use that influence differently now than I did before. His voice deepened. Because I know what losing it feels like. The room quieted at that. Joy watched him closely, weighing sincerity against rhetoric. Losing it temporarily, she corrected. Robert's jaw tightened. Long enough to decide whether I wanted to live, he replied quietly. The studio went still. Even Joy seemed taken aback, her mouth parting slightly before she closed it again. The audience fell silent, the kind of silence that listens rather than waits. Robert continued, not pressing, not dramatizing. When everything fell apart, he said, there wasn't applause. There wasn't support. There was isolation. His eyes flicked briefly downward, then back up. What came after wasn't automatic. It was earned. Applause rose slowly this time, respectful, restrained. Joy nodded once, acknowledging the gravity, but she didn't retreat. I'm not questioning your pain, she said. I'm questioning the narrative that pain automatically earns redemption. Her voice was firm, but not hostile. Robert leaned back, considering. It doesn't, he agreed. Work does. He paused, then added. And time. Joy tilted her head again. Who decides when the time is enough? She asked. The question lingered. Robert spread his hands slightly. No one, he said. That's the point. His eyes held hers. It's not a finish line. It's a process. The audience reacted, applause swelling again, louder, more confident. Joy sighed softly, a sound caught by the microphones. That sounds good, she said. But it's still easier said when the world is willing to watch you process. Robert nodded. Visibility cuts both ways, he replied. It doesn't just lift you. It exposes you. He gestured toward the cameras. Like this. The audience laughed nervously. Joy cracked a small smile, but it faded quickly. Exposure can still be a privilege, she said. Robert didn't argue. Absolutely, he said. But it's not protection. His voice sharpened slightly. It's scrutiny. The conversation shifted again, deeper, more philosophical. They spoke about public shame, about cultural memory, about how quickly society builds heroes and how eagerly it tears them down. Robert spoke with clarity now, his words flowing more freely, less guarded. Joy challenged him with precision, never raising her voice, never backing away. The audience felt pulled between them, each point landing, each counterpoint sharpening the edge. You're asking for grace, Joy said finally. Robert shook his head. I'm asking for honesty, he replied. About what change looks like. The audience applauded, louder now, the energy cresting. Joy leaned back, arms unfolding, her gaze steady. And what if honesty means admitting some people will never forgive you? She asked. Robert didn't hesitate. Then that's their right, he said. I don't need forgiveness to keep going. The line landed hard. Applause erupted, sustained, echoing through the studio. Joy studied him, something shifting in her expression. So you're fine being the villain to some people forever? She asked. Robert smiled faintly, a sad curve of the lips. I've been worse things, he said. The audience reacted instantly, laughter breaking through the tension, followed by applause. Joy shook her head, half smiling despite herself. The segment clock ticked down unnoticed. The conversation had moved beyond its original shape, becoming something else entirely. Not an interview, not an argument, a collision of perspectives with no clean resolution. As the producers signaled time running short, the energy in the room remained charged, unresolved, electric. Robert leaned back, hands resting on his knees, eyes still on Joy. Joy adjusted her papers, then looked up at him. We're not going to agree, she said. Robert nodded. I didn't come to, he replied. The audience applauded again, standing this time, the reaction louder, fuller, driven by the rawness of what they'd witnessed. As the applause washed over them, it was clear the sharp comeback hadn't ended the conversation. It had cracked it open, and whatever came next wouldn't be contained by the studio walls. The standing applause faded slowly, not because the energy died, but because the room ran out of places to put it. People sat back down as if lowering themselves after holding their breath too long. Robert Downey Jr. remained still, hands relaxed, gaze steady, the calm after impact. Joy Behar glanced toward the other hosts, then back at him, her expression thoughtful, guarded, no longer playful. The cameras stayed tight, sensing that whatever came next wouldn't be loud, but it would be heavier. Whoopi finally leaned in, voice measured, grounding. "We're touching something bigger than a single career here," she said, eyes moving between them. "We're talking about how people get judged, remembered, forgiven." The audience murmured in agreement. Joy nodded once, grateful for the pivot, but not letting go of her point. "And who gets to come back?" she added quietly. Robert turned slightly toward Whoopi, then back to Joy. "And who gets to be more than their worst moment?" he said. His voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. The weight was already there. The audience responded with low applause, a rolling sound rather than a burst, like distant thunder. Joy inhaled, then spoke again. "You're asking us to separate the person from the damage," she said. "That's hard when the damage stays visible." Robert didn't interrupt. He really listened, nodding once. "I'm asking us to acknowledge both," he replied, without pretending one cancels out the other. The room grew quiet again, but this time it wasn't tense. It was reflective. Joy's tone softened, not conceding but shifting. "Do you ever worry," she asked, "that your story becomes a blueprint that excuses behavior instead of warning against it?" The question landed gently, but it cut deep. Robert's eyes dropped for a moment, then lifted. "Yes," he said. "All the time." The honesty in his voice changed the temperature of the room. "That's why I talk about the cost," he continued. "Not the comeback. The cost." He paused. "Because there are things I can never undo." The audience sat still, no applause, just attention. Joy watched him closely. "But people don't always hear the cost," she said. "They hear the ending." Robert nodded. "Then we need to talk louder about the middle," he replied. "The ugly parts. The parts nobody wants to glamorize." His words felt deliberate, careful, like he was choosing them not just for the room, but for everyone watching at home. One of the other hosts leaned in, curious. "Do you think audiences are changing?" she asked. "About redemption?" Robert considered. "I think they're conflicted," he said. "They want accountability and hope at the same time." He glanced at Joy. "And we rarely let people have both." Joy smiled faintly at that, but her eyes stayed serious. "Hope can feel unfair," she said, "when you've watched someone else never get it." Robert nodded slowly. "I know," he said, "and I don't have an answer that fixes that." His voice lowered. "All I can do is be honest about my own path." The audience reacted then, applause rising again, warmer now, less divided. Joy raised a hand, letting it settle. "You're very good with words," she said, a hint of admiration slipping through. Robert smiled slightly. "I've had practice explaining myself," he replied. Laughter rippled through the crowd, easing the tightness just a bit. But Joy wasn't finished. "Do you think you'd be received the same way if you weren't who you are?" she asked. The question cut straight to the core. Robert didn't deflect. "No," he said plainly. "I don't." The honesty landed hard. "And that truth makes me uncomfortable." The audience murmured again, surprised by the lack of spin. Joy nodded slowly. "So you recognize the privilege," she said. Robert met her gaze. "Every day," he replied. "And I try not to waste it." He paused. "That doesn't make it fair. It just makes it real." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full. The kind of quiet that comes when two people realize they're circling the same truth from different sides. Joy finally broke it. "I don't think we disagree as much as it sounds," she said. "I think we're angry at different parts of the same system." Robert's expression softened. "I think you're right," he said. The audience responded immediately, applause rising, some people nodding, others exchanging looks. The tension hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed, less combative, more contemplative. The producers signaled again, time slipping away. Joy glanced toward the camera, then back to Robert. "Last question," she said. "What would you say to someone who feels invisible because they didn't get a second chance?" The room leaned in. This was the question that mattered. Robert didn't rush. He took a breath, deep and steady. "I'd say your story still matters," he said. "Even if no one applauds it." His voice wavered just slightly, then steadied. "And change that happens quietly is still change." The audience erupted, louder than before, applause filling the studio, some people wiping their eyes, others standing again. Joy nodded, visibly moved despite herself. "That's a good answer," she said softly. As the applause continued, Robert sat back, exhaling, the weight of the conversation finally settling. The cameras pulled back just a little, catching the table as a whole, the hosts exchanging looks, the audience buzzing. But even as the segment wrapped, it was clear this moment wouldn't stay contained. The sharp comeback had evolved into something deeper, something that challenged viewers not to pick sides, but to sit with discomfort. And as the show cut to commercial, the air still felt charged, as if the real conversation was only beginning, somewhere beyond the studio lights, waiting to spill into headlines, timelines, and debates that would stretch far beyond this single morning. When the cameras finally pulled away and the red light blinked off, the studio didn't immediately relax. There was a strange lag in the air, as if everyone needed a second to remember where they were. Applause faded into scattered chatter, but it wasn't the usual light buzz that followed a daytime segment. It was heavier, more uncertain. People stood, gathered their things slowly, still replaying words in their heads. Robert Downey Jr. rose from his chair, buttoning his jacket, his expression calm but distant, like someone who had just stepped out of a storm he hadn't fully processed yet. Joy Behar removed her glasses and set them down, exhaling. She looked at Robert again, not with confrontation now, but with something closer to reflection. "That was something," she said quietly off mic. Robert offered a small nod. "Yeah," he replied. "It was." There was no victory in his voice. No triumph. Just acknowledgement. They exchanged a brief, respectful look before producers moved in, guiding him toward the exit, already whispering about timing, transitions, the next segment. Backstage, staff members spoke in hushed tones. Some were energized, others uneasy. One producer glanced at a monitor where the clip was already cued for replay, shaking their head. "This one's going to travel," they muttered. And it did. Within minutes, short clips began appearing online. The sharp comeback. The pause before it. Joy's expression when the line landed. Robert's steady delivery, unflinching, unpolished. Social media lit up like dry grass catching flame. Captions framed the moment in bold, absolutist terms. Some hailed him as brutally honest. Others accused him of intellectual gymnastics. Joy was praised by many for asking what others wouldn't, criticized by others for pushing too hard. The comments split cleanly down the middle. Each side convinced the moment proved their point. Hashtags trended. Debate panels queued it up for evening discussion. Opinion pieces began drafting themselves in real time. One headline called it a masterclass in deflection. Another called it the most honest conversation The View has had in years. Clips replayed his line about permanence versus accountability, his admission of privilege, her insistence on fairness. Every pause was dissected. Every look analyzed. Joy addressed it later that day, briefly, with measured calm. She didn't apologize. She didn't double down. She framed it as a necessary conversation, one worth having even if it made people uncomfortable. Robert, for his part, said little. A short statement circulated from his team, emphasizing respect, dialogue, and the importance of nuance. But silence spoke louder than spin. People filled it with their own conclusions. Audience members who'd been there posted their reactions. Some described feeling chills. Others admitted they'd changed their minds halfway through. A few confessed they were still unsure what they thought, only that the moment stayed with them longer than expected. That uncertainty became part of the story. It wasn't clean. It wasn't resolved. It lingered. In the days that followed, the conversation widened beyond the two people at the table. It became about who gets grace, who doesn't, and why. About systems that reward some paths and erase others. About whether redemption is something you earn, something you're given, or something that never truly arrives. Schools discussed it. Podcasts broke it down. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds and confessionals all at once. And somewhere beneath the noise, the core of the moment remained intact. Two people, neither entirely wrong, neither entirely right, refusing to let the other off easily. A sharp comeback that didn't end the discussion, but cracked it open, exposing the messy, unresolved truth underneath. That was why it spread. Not because it was loud, but because it was unfinished. Robert returned to work, to projects, to the familiar rhythm of his career, but the clip followed him, resurfacing in interviews, in questions framed differently now. Joy continued her role, sharper perhaps, but also more deliberate, aware of the weight her words could carry. Neither retreated. Neither claimed victory. The aftermath wasn't about who won. It was about what was stirred. And now the moment sits with you, the viewer, still echoing. So here's where the story turns outward. What did you feel watching it unfold? Did Robert's words resonate with you? Or did Joy's questions hit closer to home? Do you believe in redemption with conditions or accountability without expiration? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This is one of those moments where your perspective matters. And if you want more cinematic, intense, and emotionally charged stories like this one, subscribe to the Narration Show right now. Stay with us as we dive deeper into the confrontations that don't fade when the cameras stop rolling.